Good evening, viewers, and a warm welcome back to Startup Speaks. Now, this session is brought to you jointly by the Department of Information Technology and Electronics, Government of West Bengal, together with NASSCOM 10,000 Startups. And it wouldn't have been possible without the support of the Government of West Bengal, and in particular, the NASSCOM Industry Partnership Program, or NIPP for short, and of course, our broadcast partner, which is Proho.in. Now, today's episode is the concluding session of a three-part series that has been focusing on the NIPP Retail Tech Challenge. And as you know from the previous episodes, this involved well over 200 applications, from which eventually 25 startups were chosen, followed by 9 winners. And in today's session, we have 3 of the stars from that competition. So we have Shaju Satyadevan, who's the director at Tranquility IoT and Big Data Solutions. With him, we have Shivang Desai, who's the CEO of Big Things. And last but not the least, we have Shamil Abdullah, who's the co-founder and CEO of QTrack. Gentlemen, a very warm welcome. Very good evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Shaju, why don't I get started with you?
No problem.
And ask you to share with our viewers a little bit about your background and a bit about your entrepreneurial journey, and then hone in on what made you decide on Tranquility as your current venture.
Before I start, I just want to apologize that probably I might be coughing in between because I just even though it's been 2 months I recovered from COVID, my cough hasn't gone off. So while talking, I might be coughing. So please pardon me for that. So just want to, if I explain, I've been in the industry for about 22 years. I've been working around the globe as a business intelligence consultant, and mostly I studied also in Australia, and then I settled there. Then I moved on to the US, and then finally I was in England till about 2010 before I decided to move back to India. Kind of I was so when I moved here, I was planning to do some research. So I was part of a research group in Amrita Vishwavidyapeetham, which is it's Amrita University in Kollam, and I was primarily focused in cloud security at that time. And then in 2013, we got a proposal approved by Government of India, that is MeitY. At that time, it was Department of Electronics and IT. To develop a secure, scalable, interoperable platform for Internet of Things. So that's where the journey started. So it was purely a research-based focused work that we've been doing. And, that gave us a broader understanding of the market is, where the market is heading to. And so we decided to build, initial concept was to develop a lot of software components for it. But when we moved into the market, we found that the hardware was so expensive. So Internet of Things is something which is going to go off, and it's about 50 billion users going to flood the entire globe. The devices, sorry, not users, 50 billion devices to flood the market by 2020. So for that kind of a volume, the devices should be more cheaper. The way the devices communicate, it cannot be all internet dependent. So all that actually gave us a good thought process, how the Internet of Things need to be designed. So we had a different perspective. When we came in 2013, it was all cloud-based solutions. Everywhere it was cloud-based solutions. We have big-time players at that time, mostly asking you to connect your devices directly to the cloud and then push your data to the cloud, and then the cloud will do the rest of the things. So it was, we were actually thinking, 50 billion devices all trying to push data to the cloud all the time, a lot of them streaming it all the time. It's not going to be a viable solution. So we need to have more localized method of doing it. And also, even though the cloud was very popular, a lot of these people, especially big companies, they don't want the data to be sent to the cloud. So they would prefer to have the data localized, So then that was again a big hiccup that's going to actually hamper the growth of IoT as such, to the scale in which that has been predicted by Gartner and other big time people who do analysis on this side. So we came out with the concept of gateway-centric approach way back in 2014. So we developed a gateway as such, where we said every IoT network has to be localized by using a gateway-centric approach. That's where we started off our journey from a hardware side perspective. Then we thought like we should make hardware more cheaper, and then we decided to think, okay, let's try to build a lot of hardware. So we had a different kind of an approach for building the hardware, which I think I will subsequently explain because you had other sessions, where I don't want to cover everything now. So that's where the process went on, and then by 2018 we had a very mature kind of product line and processes in place. And then we had a lot of encouragement from the management also saying that, why don't you go ahead and do a startup? And that's when we became in 2019 to go into a startup mode, and then moved all the products that we have developed so far into this startup, and trying to push. That's how the journey started.
Great, fascinating. And we'll definitely be back for more questions. In the meantime, Shivang, why don't I move to you? So you work in fashion tech, right? And that's one of those within retail, that's one of those rare domains where the two apparently contradictory epithets, hot and cool, apply equally. It's one of those rare domains, right? So tell us about your entrepreneurial journey and in particular about big things. What made you hit on this idea
Absolutely.
and the evolution of that venture?
Absolutely. So I'll maybe start going back to when I was in high school, and that's where my journey with tech began. Where back in the mid to late 90s, I was sitting and coding websites in HTML. But then there was a flip, and I actually ended up studying architecture. And I'm talking about construction architecture, not software architecture. So I came out an architect who then decided to go back to tech. And I ended up founding a company straight out of college, which was in drones. I after that went on to study an MBA in the US. So again, that's a mix that doesn't quite often happen, and I partly credit going through so many diverse routes of education and exposure towards where we've landed up. After the MBA, I started another company in the US. That was in healthcare marketing online for medical professionals. Built and sold that, moved back to India in 2015. And that's when I connected with my current co founder. We both go back to the same roots, MBA plus architects. And we got talking about a tech idea and the topic of fashion came up. And fashion was one of those domains where both of us realized you're buying clothes, I'm buying clothes, and we're returning a lot of what we buy. Why are we returning them? It's not the right size. It doesn't fit well. There's a color mismatch between what we thought we were buying and what we actually got. So we started to look into this, and when we took the lens to it, we realized that this was a gigantic problem globally, a problem that runs into way like $1 trillion of losses every year for retailers around the world. And fashion's a big space, right? Fashion is not just about e-commerce and the fast fashion that you're buying, but it also includes things like workwear. It includes, whether you like to think of it or not, uniforms that people have to wear, aviation, hospitality, military, and then there's so many other diversifications within that as well. And when we looked at this closely, we realized that there is an enormous potential for a startup that can solve this problem for major brands. But when we came to it, we needed a differentiator. We couldn't just solve it in any traditional sense. So we couldn't go about it the way that MNCs and gigantic multinationals could, by throwing money at it and hiring the best of the best talent. We needed to take an approach that was not normally taken. And that's where artificial intelligence came in, where we started to apply AI to what we are doing to try and solve these major problems with the use of something that every customer and every shopper has on them all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, their mobile phone. and just with the help of their mobile phone and artificial intelligence, we are able to help these shoppers buy better, reduce returns, take brands more sustainable. And this is really what we've evolved into at this stage, and continue to do so.
And did either of you, so you or your co-founder, have not a passing interest in fashion? It's clearly not a background in fashion, but an interest, an active interest. Were you following the scene? Were you looking at trends?
Absolutely. So I'm the tech guy out of the two, and my co-founder is the fashion person. So she's a fashion designer. She's been a marketing specialist at an MNC. She headed a brand in Singapore for 8 years, and then she brought all these skills to the table. So I don't claim to be the fashionista here. I just hope to be the best techie there can be here.
Great. I'm sure you're being modest, and we're going to explore that further in another round of questions. In the meantime, Shamil, why don't we go on to you and tell us about your journey, your entrepreneurial journey, and in particular, what made you converge to your current venture, which is ClueTrack.
Yeah. So this is my third company. So I started my entrepreneurial journey with my first startup back in 2012. It I would say happened by chance, the first one. So what happened was I was of the idea that I'll work in the industry for a couple of years. So I worked for around 7 years in the industry with companies like Dell, EMC, Wipro, and so on. And my idea was I'll go for an MBA like Shivang's plan. But the only twist is that I did not go for the MBA. I dropped out. I got an admission to Indian School of Business, but then I thought anyway I want to do a business, and that was a time in which smartphones were really coming up, and I did a couple of apps which were really good or it was doing well in app stores. Then I thought, let me drop out of the MBA and then try doing this. So 2012 I came out without much idea about how to run a startup, what a startup was. It might be surprising that I was not even clear what's the difference between a service company and a product company. I ran it for a year. I started with a couple of products initially, but then it ended up as an Indian company, it ended up like a service company. Then I thought service is not the right way to go. Some of the apps which I built in my first startup is still there, giving me revenues and so on. But then I thought let me shift, because service is not the right domain to be. I can't compete with Infosys or n number of service startups out there. So in 2013, we looked at me and 3 co-founders were there. So we looked at various different ideas, and then we zeroed in on one problem statement. That is buying food items or groceries regularly is a big problem statement. It takes away hours of everybody's effort going down to the store, getting it, etc. This is one of those earlier I was 2013, Big Basket was just coming up. The whole thing about this hyper local grocery delivery was not there to the form what you can see right now. So we started this company called Jeff Store, which was a hyper local delivery startup. What we were very clear was that there's a huge demand for the space, but what is critical is to arrive unit economics to that particular kind of a activity or operation. So we basically focused on tech, focused on making sure that maximum steps are automized, and then we launched it. In 2 years I would say did pretty well. We had around 120 plus stores in Bangalore, doing plus a number of 1,000 plus orders a day. We got acquired in 2015 by around December. So after my acquisition, I had some period I had to spend with the acquiring company. So I was spending that time there. At that point in time, I thought okay, why don't I do something like a hobby project, right? So I thought let me do the similar thing what I did in my first startup. That is make mobile apps, because that's what I was good at, right? So there were some apps which I had built at that point in time, maybe it took maybe a week to build or 2 weeks to build, but it continues to give me revenue. So what I thought is I imagine this, a scenario where I'm able to build maybe 10 such apps. Okay, I can create a lot of passive income. That's where the idea started. Then I thought okay, why do I have to do it passive? Why not I create a team of 10 people and maybe we'll release mobile apps every 18 days. 18 was a number somehow in my plan I came up with. And then I started looking for, okay, how do I do this now? Okay, for making mobile apps, you should first have an idea, right? And one of the ways in which I used to find ideas to build products was reading through customer reviews. So I used to go through customer reviews and then come up with ideas. Okay, these are the problem statement, and then try to build an app around it. So in my first startup, when I was doing my first startup, it was okay because I was not married. Okay, it was like I used to have a lot of time with me. But down the lane, I was married. I had a kid. It was difficult to basically go through reviews and find ideas. So ClueTrack was first written to identify ideas from reviews. Okay, so we made this product, made this script which basically goes through the reviews and identifies possible pain points. Now what happened is, like, using this, I found out like me and my co-founder Subbu, we found out some ideas and we bounced it off to a bunch of product managers. I was in Delhi at that point in time, so we bounced out to people like Paytm, Snapdeal, and so on. And then they came back and said, guys, your ideas are good. Why do you want to build ideas like this? It'll be like making movies, right? How do you get these ideas? That engine itself, why don't you convert to a product? So that was the genesis of ClueTrack. Then we thought, like, let's do that particular one. And then we basically did an evaluation of the market. We basically identified different ideas and started going to different persona of people. Like, we first went to product managers, then we went to marketing folks, then we went to branding folks, we went to sales folks. We identified that the kind of people who will really find value of this kind of an approach are people who really are looking for customer experience data or customer experience insights. So right now, ClueTrack is a customer experience analytics platform. What it primarily does is that it basically goes through customer feedback across touch points, be it like, social media or your own chatbot or your own website feedback, and then come up with what are the experience factors you should change in your brand. So that's about my journey.
Great. Very interesting indeed. Back for more questions. Shaju, we get back to you, and this time around we want to know a lot more about not just the business model, not just the USPs, which of course we'll get to, but before we do that, I want to start about the story behind Tranquility. I mean, look, there are not hundreds, but thousands of companies out there which do big data and which do analytics, right? How many of them are called Tranquility? And when you go onto the website and you're looking at About Us, how many of them in the world start not with some huge business aspiration, but with a message of love, right? With a message of gratitude and kindness. So there's a story there. So tell us that story first, and then we talk about the technical USPs.
The whole purpose of this, just to give a background, I had a plan of retirement at the age of 39 and then come back to India and then do something for the society. That was my plan. So I could do it when I was 39. We packed our bags and we came back to India. And then, the main reason why I'm associated with Amrita University is there's a lot of social related work that is happening here. So I want to be part of that. Most of the researches that happens here is very social focused, very direct impact on to people who are underprivileged. So that's where, we want to get involved. So the purpose of starting this, moving all our products into the startup itself is to generate funds so that we can support a lot of community activities that is going on. So that was the main reason why we started. So even though the startup is purely IoT based and things like that, the whole purpose of this is to fund a lot of these activities, at the village level, to help people out, not only with technology, but also to support them in various ways. So that's a fundamental, principle behind Tranquility as such, coming up. So that has been the driving force behind us. But we had a very good idea of, what our product streams has to be. That was very clear for us right from the beginning itself. So we focused at some of our products are very focused towards village. For example, in the healthcare domain, what we found is there is a lot of healthcare workers who actually go to the villages to collect information but what they found is, it's taking a lot of time for them to collect information, feed them into the mobile phone, store them, and then come back to the base station, then upload
and then
it.
feed that into again, upload it. in the
That's
server.
it was like a lot of mistakes that was happening. They make a lot of mistakes, especially the vitals of the patients. When they record it, and the vitals were completely wrong, and because of which, the government was not able to give a proper analysis of that. So what we did is we devised a new device which can be connected to their BP apparatus and the glucometers and things like that, which will convert them into a Bluetooth device. So this is linked directly to their mobile phones, so mobile phone apps. So they just enter the name of the patient, their details, and then they connect the device to the patient. Information from the machine directly gets stored onto the app, and then it get pushed directly back into the to the government service, the health department service, where they can do analysis. To extend this, in some places, there is no connectivity whatsoever. So we have an added feature of storing this information locally also, and then export it, at a later point of time. So so everything that we try to do is actually trying to connect our solutions with some kind of service oriented activities also. So that's where the technology can be used or put to good use, especially in the service of the humanity. So that's where tranquility is, the focus of the tranquility is.
Great. That's so heartening. That's so noble of you. Just going back to that particular healthcare sector example that you said. So at the point when the medical device is being administered, or the test is being taken, right? What about? So you're saying the data at that point is flowing through the app into the server, and then the government can make use of it. What about the diagnostic report, which typically takes anything, depending on the test, like 24 hours, 48 hours, sometimes even longer? How does that get connected, and how does that be tracked one-on-one with the individual patient in this case?
This is mostly to identify the health parameters of all the citizens, especially people below poverty. So the health workers actually roam around villages trying to collect this information, and then this is actually passed on to the local authorities, like for example, village office or panchayat offices, and then they know the statistics and how the health parameters of their citizens are, and based on which government actually gives special medical attention to those villages which need special care. So these is a very important driving factor for most of these for villages, especially because the health the help that they get from the health department depends on a lot of these parameters that has been extracted from them. So a mistake that they make from in entering the data is actually literally is going to affect them a lot. So instead of a pressure of 120 over 80, is that they put it as other way around. So it makes no sense.
It becomes insane. Yeah.
That's right. It becomes insane. So that's the reason why this has actually helped them a lot. So there's a lot of requests that is coming from the healthcare department. Another thing that we are actually proposing, we're trying to build at the moment is there is the patient's non-invasive method of measuring CO2 from a patient who is bedridden is very difficult to find. It's very expensive, like 1.5 to 2 lakhs. That's something which is in that range. That too, you have to import from overseas. Philips is producing that. So we are developing with some of the government hospitals to do side channel measurement of CO2 of a patient, which is very important to know the heart condition, the health parameter, the breathing capacity, the lung capacity, the condition of the lungs of a patient. Usually they do is they take blood from the arteries and do arterial blood gas analysis, which is a cumbersome process. The next option is to insert a probe into the lungs and then directly read from it. So that is an invasive method. So this is something which you put a small cannula into your nostrils, and then it gives you a much closer reading than, it might not be very accurate, but it gives you a very good idea to take whether an action has to be taken or not, rather than before it gets worsened up. So these are some of the innovative things that we try to work with hospitals and government and see, okay, this is going to be very helpful, especially which is very difficult to find in a primary health center in a village. Likewise, a low cost ventilator. There's something which we are working on at the moment, which has got the capability to understand the breathing parameters or the breathing patterns of the patient, and release the patient with a sufficient amount of air to breathe and then suck back in. That too is non-invasive. But it's going to be much cheaper, which is affordable to healthcare for primary healthcare centers to host it. So it will be affordable for villages also. So these are the areas in healthcare that we are very much focusing on.
Shaju, when you talk about much cheaper, give us an idea of the scale. If this were not the case, what would the market rate be, and what is it that you are charging to make it affordable?
So like a non-invasive ventilator might cost you something like 60,000-70,000 and plus. If I'm talking about some of the Indian mix, but if you look at some of the imported ones, it's more than a lakh and a half. This is non-invasive. We hope with the support of the government, with subsidies and things like that, we will be able to make something for less than 25,000 rupees.
Wow.
25,000 rupees, a maximum of 30,000 rupees. That's what we propose to. So we are actually working with some of the leading sensor providers like TI to help us get sensors on a much cheaper scale, so that some of the sensors can be, for example, differential pressure sensor, which is actually used, very sensitive pressure sensor, to identify when the patient is breathing and when he's exhaling, is something which we are, these are some of the expensive things which we're also trying to do in parallel with the help of, some of the research students to develop a differential pressure sensor internally also to do that. So, we definitely think that we can bring it out for something like, 25,000 to 30,000 rupees.
Wonderful. Great. And that's a huge impact across a large scale of people. Wonderful.
Yeah,
Shivan, let me go on to you, and maybe we'll try and get your USPs, sort of bring your USPs to life through some live use cases. So assume, let's say I'm looking for a jacket, right? So I'm the consumer. I'm looking for a jacket, and there are two basic perspectives to this, right? One is, of course, the color palette and the texture and the nuances of that, and my own idiosyncratic sense of style or taste. That's one particular thing, right? But the other is actually the measurements, because even if everything looks great and I buy it and then it's not a great fit, then I can't buy it and I can't use this, right? And what I understand from your website is that your algorithm is that strong that if I have a smartphone, a good smartphone, and I have just two, if I'm not mistaken, just two photographs, you'll be able to gauge my torso, right? You'll be able to gauge all of the measurements and help in the fitment of that. And then, of course, we talk about the look and whether gray suits me or beige suits me. That's a different question altogether. So let's start there. How does that work?
Absolutely.
First, did I get it right?
Yes, you did get it right. The one thing that I'd add to what you said is, first you've got to decide which brand of jacket you want. And that's where the problem all starts, because fashion brands don't have a standard specification when they design. Everyone decides what their small is going to be, what their medium is, what their large is, and so on. But there is no coordination. So each brand has this specific sizing of their own. Even though they all carry a medium or a large label size, they don't all fit alike. And they may oftentimes be different sizes that you need in different brands. So now this is the major problem that we're trying to solve. Now, when you actually take your two pictures, our AI, machine learning, computer vision all work together to determine your measurements. Then this goes through an algorithmic processing of the product that you're looking at, in this case, the jacket. And it will basically calculate a data-based approach to telling you what size you need and how well it's going to fit you, not just overall, but across your various body dimensions. So your shoulders, your chest, your waist and hips, and so on. So you can actually pick the best fitting products for your body type, and you may actually end up picking brands that you've never ever worn before, and you've never had the courage to try before, but may actually be the best fitting products for you. And then this, of course, leads on to the other parts of it, which is our other products, which involve actual visualization, which is the other part that we touched on. So once you found out exactly what size and fit you want, the next logical question is, how is it going to look on me? How does it move? If this is leather or if it's wool, how does that actually affect the drape and movement of the fabric? And what do I pair it with? Is it going to go with what I have in my wardrobe, or am I going to have to buy a fancy new pair of sneakers and a great new pair of jeans to make this jacket look great? So this is where the products actually expand out to, where the same photos of yours with your mobile phone actually set up an avatar of you. So this avatar that is created looks like you, measures like you, has your skin tone, your hairstyle, your body, all of it. It's a uh, no judgments. Bald is beautiful.
Yeah.
So and there's a lot of evidence pointing to that, especially with men, but equally so with women. Fashion, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it creates an avatar that looks and measures exactly like you. Then our AI also creates a pipeline which takes 2D photos of clothing and translates them into 3D. Now you try on that clothing, you see how it moves, looks, and drapes on your body. You match it and pair it with different styles of clothing to see how it's going to work with what's in your closet or with other stuff. And then finally, when you end up buying, you don't end up returning these products. And that goes back to the whole problem statement that we started out with. You're not returning because you got the right size, you know how it looks, you know how it fits. The only reason left for you that you might return, leaving aside, of course, mistakes with deliveries and logistics, is the touch and feel. So if it maybe doesn't feel the way that you wanted it to, that's the
Yeah.
only part that we, at this point of time, cannot yet solve for, but hope to be able to in the near future.
And one would tend to think that that one particular thing, the tactile sensation of this, does this linen feel good, or is this herringbone thing a little too, you know heavy for my frame, would be a very small minuscule proportion of the entire set of problems that you've set out to solve, right?
Right. So about 70% of all returns are because of size, fit, and look. Now, surprisingly, less than 5% are because of the tactility or the way it feels. So while we can't address that, adding 5% more to a reduction of returns is fabulous from a
Right.
sustainability standpoint, from an economic standpoint, and this is where we hope to also go down the line.
Wonderful. Let's expand the vista now, Shivang, because we talked about I as an individual consumer and the visualization aspect of it. Now I expand that completely to, it's not just me choosing one particular jacket. I want to talk about two things. One is the entire virtual showroom, and the other one, very interesting, very exciting, is the entire virtual fashion ramp or a fashion show. Right. So how does your venture collaborate in these two kind of things?
Absolutely. So virtual fashion shows and virtual showrooms were both actually born of the pandemic. These were not things that we were doing pre-pandemic. Now, people, on a general basis and laymen think fashion shows are to showcase fashion, and they are events for brands to make themselves popular. But fashion shows are actually big business. That's where buyers from manufacturers and exporters around the world actually come to see how clothing looks and drapes, how it moves on the runway. It is usually followed by buying sessions with the brands. So there's a lot of business aspect to it. It's not just uh, a nice piece of fluff that brands have to do because they're expected to. Now, when the pandemic hit, you couldn't do virtual fashion shows anymore. People couldn't travel. There were lockdowns across the world. And some of our clients came to us and asked us, they said to us, you're doing avatars, you're doing virtual clothing, and you're doing these virtual experiences. Could you not put them on a virtual ramp?
Synthesize all of these elements together to create that experience.
Exactly, and that's what we ended up doing, and we were lucky enough to have the first one of these experiences crafted to be shown at the New York Fashion Week, and that went live on a massive stage. It saw a lot of other entrants jump into the space around the world. Of course, that's bound to happen. but we're proud of the fact that we were the first to do it with virtual avatars of real people and then designer wear from several different famous designers. So that's how virtual fashion shows happened, and they became a way for brands to organize fashion shows far more affordably and far more conveniently than organizing a real event. And then the virtual showrooms came about after that, because as people were shopping online, there was a lack of immersion, there was a lack of excitement with what they were doing. You go into a boring flat 2D web page and you see a model wearing a jacket in the top right corner as an image, and you see a bunch of things like choose your size and a mostly incomplete description, as of most e-commerce websites. And then you've got to make your mind up basis that. So virtual showrooms basically are a way, again, of expanding upon the same immersive, engaging interface, which turns your websites into a 3D immersive interactive space where you can, just like a game, you can move around. You can use your own avatar to do so. You can virtually try on clothing while you're at it, and you can browse a store that could not possibly exist in the real world. Of course, you could have a copy of a real world store. You could have
Sure.
something that follows the laws of physics where you're walking on the ground and therefore walls around you and so on. But you could equally well be floating through space and picking clothes out of the air, or moving around underwater and taking your jacket off the back of the passing whale. So that's what virtuality opens one up to in a shopping sphere, and that's where virtual showrooms are a big game changer today, and in not just the fashion industry but several others, including automotive, electronics, and many more.
We'll definitely be back for more questions. One question which I have, and I'll just put it out there as a question, right? Is particularly when you have visualizations and gamification and AR, some combination of all of these, supersede what we know to be our reality all around us, right? Is there maybe a tendency for consumers on the longer term, post-pandemic, right? And I'm thinking more in terms of a cognitive behavior or a culture, to be more immersed in that, because compared to that, even the most exciting, flamboyant reality is boring. Yep.
And that's the metaverse, right? That's the upcoming future that we might all be living in if the tech pundits are to be believed.
Indeed. So on that point, Shamil, let's go over to you, and of course we can talk about quite a few different kinds of features, but I want to begin by talking about accessibility and affordability, because one of the things that you see on your website is that all the way, I mean, I could be a startup founder, right, with a co-founder and a whole bunch of people who are doing gigs to support my venture. I could be one of the people using it, and so could a Fortune 500, right? So you have this entire range, which means you have this entire spectrum of people who can all be benefited some way or the other from those insights. So tell us, why don't you start by talking to us about that?
As with any business, it's important. It was and it is, and it's going to be important for us to identify our right customer segment. And that has been the case with, of course, all my startups, be it TrueTrack or be it my startup before. So what we have realized is that there are stages of a company or stages of a brand where our product will be maximum useful, and that segment I might term it as like a fast adopter. I can't say early adopter, but a fast adopter. If I go and pitch to that kind of a person, they will adopt it fast. Right now, that segment is not like startups or SMEs. It's basically large enterprises. So and of course, this came through multiple experimentation. There was a time when we used to project TrueTrack as a platform where you can find mobile app ideas, like how we used to do. Then we used to project it as helping you understand, also helping you, formulate your marketing messaging. Then later on, we identified customer experience, and when it came to customer experience per se, which are the kind of brands who are so particular about customer experience. Of course, all brands have to be good in customer experience, but the ones which are like really, really particular about it is like B2C brands, and within B2C brands itself, who has got that focus to spend money on top of this, right? That focus is coming from only from large enterprises. So we serve mostly large enterprises. When I say large enterprises, these are brands which are definitely having like $100 million plus kind of revenues.
And tell us how you differentiate yourself from other players in the market, because there could be other players as well, right, who are saying, okay, we're going to give you similar kind of an experience.
Right. In terms of a differentiation, in terms of what we do, there are primarily two areas where we are like clearly differentiated across all the competition out there. One is the accuracy and granularity with which we can understand customer conversations. So that's something which is rare in the market. Hardly, like, there are very few tools which actually does it very accurately at a very high granular level. We have been able to do it primarily because our focus has been very clear. We are focusing on customer experience analysis, and for analyzing customer experience, how should we look at that data? Our machine learning systems have been, trained for that kind of a understanding or that kind of a discerning. So that's one place where we are like really doing well compared to other competition, because our accuracy levels are above 90% plus. That's one. Second is that TrueTrack as a platform also has extensive data collection capabilities. So be it like any kind of your first party touch points, like, be it your own website, your own CRM, your own NPS surveys, chatbots, be it online data, e-commerce data, anything, whatever is out there in terms of data which is legally allowed to be collected, that we can collect as a platform. We've got extensive capabilities to aggregate that. So these two are the key differentiators what we have as a platform.
I'm positing there's probably a third differentiator as well, because it is not just the value of these insights, but it's also the thought leadership. And I'm talking specifically about the insight reports. So let's say Shahid, you talked about healthcare and the work that he's doing in healthcare, right? I see immediate synergies right here in this conversation, where someone like Shahid may want to look at your insight report and look at healthcare, give some keyword search, and get in additional insights and analytics particular to his work, which is going to shape up his work and his offerings better. Is there something there as well?
Absolutely. See, what the platform has been able to do for market researchers or strategy consultants, branding folks, has been that the kind of insight they used to get with the 3 months of market research, they are able to get it at fingertips real time. That's a big impact for the end user. That's a key differentiator about the customer segment identifies, because now they don't have to formulate a survey, figure out the respondents, go to the people. You do one survey, then after that again reiterate. Nothing like that is there. So on real time, you're able to assess customer experience.
Exactly, because whenever you're talking about market surveys, right? A, it's time consuming. B, it's expensive. And C, you will always try to second guess yourself about the veracity, the authenticity of the data, and the robustness and the methodology and all of that stuff, right? So being able to access insightful reports right at the click of a button, I think is a huge win. Great. So we've got about 15 minutes to go to the end of our program. Why don't we talk about something which is unavoidable, and that's the pandemic. There's no point living in denial, right? So probably, Shaju, why don't I go back to you and ask you to talk to us very briefly about your experience during this entire continuing pandemic situation, these 18 months plus counting, and what were your key learnings? What were your maybe some of your high points during this entire period?
To be frank, we launched at a very wrong time we launched, because we went to the market in 2019 November as a company, and then we started to establish connection with people. We had few businesses in place. We were going to start implementation. We had a hospital where we were going to implement our real-time location system for tracking wheelchairs, stretchers, biomedical equipments, patient movements, and employee movements. So we already signed a contract with them, and then March you had the break. The pandemic broke out. We never took it serious. We thought like, oh, it just passed by, but by April it was like it was like a fire spreading around and it started to find the impact in India also soon. By April, May, it was just like a fire. but my team was like, they had so much of strength. The hospital we were implementing, it's full of COVID patients, but still, the hardware team stood there. They put in all the hardware required for tracking. The hospital never had the staff to support us, the electrical department. So instead of taking us 1 month to put the hardware in, it took us 4.5 months to put the hardware. And myself and the team was just staying there during that pandemic, just thinking that we'll somehow survive. But in 4 months, 4.5 months, we put the hardware in, but the hospital was not ready to start implementing it. Likewise, all the other projects went on a stall. We had industrial IoT solutions for preventive maintenance. So we had some pilot projects, paid pilot projects from some of the companies, and we were going to implement it. And we went there, we did the survey, but that wasn't put on hold. So the financially also, we never had any other support. So we were really in a very tight situation. Literally we couldn't work all the way till November, December of 2020. And then when we started back again in January, the second wave hit us in March.
Yes.
So it was being in a hardware company, it was so difficult. We couldn't get our team in to work from the office, because hardware means you need to have a physical presence in the office. Work from home is not possible at all. And then we had no means of working, because there was strict government orders that all offices should be kept closed. So we had to still continue to fund our employees. We had to pay our employees, which is such a difficult thing. And this is not like a metro city. Most of the students here are coming from very normal families, and they have education loans and things like that. We somehow managed to survive, and then 30% cut in salaries at the very end of 2020 to survive. So we could go back to the market only actually starting 2021, close to about April, May. So now we are getting, we are in the market. We have started to get inquiries. We started to go into providing solutions. But from a hardware company's perspective, it was one of the most difficult times, not only in terms of finances, in terms of implementing, finding customers, going to the market, high risk. We all contracted COVID because we were in customer sites. Majority of the team, most of them had infected with COVID, and some of them never had even one shot, vaccination. So so it was really tough for us. It was really tough for us. Something which we will never forget, in our entire life. Yeah, it was really tough.
I'm sure. But now with things opening up, are things better for you in terms of the ecosystem, and in terms of getting traction and the conversations with prospects and so forth?
It is getting better, but the finance is still a bit of a problem for us, because we have almost exhausted all the funds supporting our staff while during the COVID period. So now we are, NASCOM is also helping us. They connected us with Flipkart, and we have some other few projects which is actually going on, which is actually helping us to continue on. I'm actually connecting with a lot of consultants. I'm actually working with a lot of people who have been in the industry, and who are helping us also. So we are slowly making our headway into the market at the moment, but it is tough for us. I definitely want to be open here. It is really tough, even though we have a very unique solution, end-to-end solution for IoT, and also analytical capabilities with a GUI-based tool, everything with us. But we're not able to get into the market with the way we would love to have get exposed to. So that's still holding us back.
Right. One can only hope that things get much better and smoother for you, and hopefully, the third wave, if at all it comes, it's going to be far less virulent, far less debilitating than the second wave.
Yeah, thank you.
Shiva, how has the pandemic treated you? I know you were in Milan, at the heart of the fashion world globally, and you had to come back home, and you thought maybe, I'll go back when this is all over. And you're still here, like maybe 16, 18 months down the line. How are things at the moment? What are some of the key learnings that you've had during this period that you'd like to share with our viewers?
So I was actually smiling when Sheju mentioned that they launched at at the end of 2019, because that's exactly when we launched as well. And at that point of time, we were picked by Prada as one of the top companies whose tech they wanted to mentor and build on. So my co-founder and I, we packed our bags and moved to Milan. Now, roll 3-4 months down the line, and Milan suddenly became the epicenter of the global COVID outbreak. And we guys had to take a decision. Do we stick it out, or do we flee? So, being Indians, being far from family and home, we thought that the sensible decision was to flee. So we fled. We came back to India, and we're waiting to ride it out. Now, I'll tell you something about the fashion industry. It's very, very conservative. The biggest change in the fashion industry in the past 100 years in how they've done business is sometime around the early 2000s, they started selling online. That's it. Nothing else has changed in nearly the past 100 years, either the way they manufacture, the way they sell, the coordination, or anything else. So during the basically first 6 months of the pandemic, there was no business for us. Revenues were at absolute zero. We were looking out for different opportunities, and we are wondering what is going to happen over here. We knew that the fashion industry, in any case, never had a digital budget. There was no such thing as a digital budget. It was an experiment that they wanted to take 3 or 4 years down the line, and they would see to it closer to time. This was the general consensus. So being in fashion tech, this came as a rude shock after we'd spent a lot of time developing products that could be enormously useful, and nobody was willing to try it because they were very comfortable with the way they were doing things. So the pandemic changed that suddenly. In about 6 months, everyone had a digital budget. Everyone was trying to sell online. Everyone was trying to cut their costs. They were trying to increase their revenues. Footfalls had virtually disappeared in store. Everyone was shopping online. People were shopping for loungewear more than they were ever shopping for shirts and trousers. Everything changed, and suddenly that's what happened. So from the middle of the pandemic, the first of the brands started coming to us. We developed these new products, which were virtual fashion shows and showrooms. These brought more eyeballs to the technology. And over the second half of 2020 and all the way until now in 2021, there's been a rapid growth of big things, of the demand for the tech, the adoption, and the deployment all over the world, with fashion brands that are Fortune 50 companies, Fortune 500 companies, all the way to individual independent designer boutiques and made-to-measure players, tailors. The tailor who's at the end of your street, we have some of those who are using the products because they want measurements, and the customers are now spoiled. They don't want to leave their homes to go get measured by an actual tailor. So,
Right.
That's what the pandemic has done. A period of completely of no movement and then very fast growth.
And were you prepared for that kind of pace of acceleration? Because sometimes too much of a good problem can also be overwhelming.
It can. So this is where I think being a tech entrepreneur beforehand helped. So we always designed our systems to be highly scalable from the start. So we plan for massive demand way before we get it. But that's not to say we didn't end up crashing our servers on multiple occasions, and we severely sometimes underestimated how much our cloud costs were going to be.
Right. Great. But those are good problems to have, right? If the traction is huge, those are probably better problems to have than not having business. Great.
No complaints.
Shamil, we go to you. What's the pandemic experience been for you? What have been your key learnings?
For me also, it has been somewhat similar to Shivang's experience. So March came in, and I would say the onset of COVID. There was initial, April, May, June till around August timeframe. our customers were in a confused state. Say almost nobody knew how long this is going to be, right? And these are like B2C kind of firms, which included like automotive firms, of course, CPG firms, retailers, and so on. A lot of the retail stores have closed and such kind of things. So initial those months, it was like really a stagnant period where we realized that adoption of new customers is going to be like impossible. Even existing pitches we have done, the POCs we have done where we were about to onboard, we understood that nothing is going to happen at that point in time. So at that point in time, a couple of months, we really stayed low, primarily interacting with the existing customers, whomever we have spoken earlier. We were basically sympathizing with them, like whatever help we can do, all pro bono, nothing on a cost basis. Whichever customers could maintain continuous service with us, they continue with us. Of course, there was a slight dip in revenues, and we just maintained, like we were just like, we also did not know how long this will go ahead with, right? But around July, August timeframe, what happened is like by then, e-commerce had taken over. So in terms of the number of transactions, what is happening on e-commerce, even on mature markets like United States, we could see a 60% jump. In India, there are like e-commerce platforms who have seen 10x jump on their transactions on the platform. So suddenly what happened is like the number of digital footprints which customers start leaving behind started growing tremendously. The number of reviews we see. Even if you look at banks, the number of digital reach outs customers make to the banks have gone up like tremendously compared to early time frame. Nowadays, nobody visits a branch. And even people are becoming more and more familiar talking to chatbots rather than customer care calls. So that's like a huge, I would say, conducive atmosphere for somebody like TrueTrack, because all those even businesses who used to say like, what, my e-com business is hardly like 3%. What can you make a difference, right? Suddenly their e-com business was like 40% or 50%, right? Suddenly it became like a thing you should not go away with. So that resulted in, I would say, tremendous growth in terms of customer adoption, number of customers coming back, brands looking at customer experience like never before. Because you just imagine scenario of India, like 1 billion people suddenly become so familiar with Flipkart and Amazon that switching brands is so easy right now. It's just like click of a button. Okay, brands don't have a say through their distributor or some of those outlets which they had hand on. All those are gone, right? Now the only point which matters is customer experience. Are you able to deliver a better, best customer experience from the time somebody sees your brand to the time he experiences for the first time and he continuously experiences? And identifying what are those niggles customers face. It's difficult to identify using the old methods of surveys. You need to have a better method, and the data is out there, and TrueTrack is able to crunch it. So that way we have been able to, I would say, live through and see, I would say, growth.
Yeah, not just survive, but come out trumps, be able to thrive, be in a position of not just coping, not just firefighting, but thriving. Great, wonderful. Guys, I'll just share very quickly and anecdotally. I have a fledgling startup of my own. So between 2019, all through 2019, my co-founders and his team of technical experts, we've been working on this. And we said, it's business as usual. Year 2020, in the month of April, beginning of financial year, we'll do a soft launch. And then we'll deploy it to the market. So that was our plan. Okay. So then the pandemic hit us. And everything just blew out of the water. We had done a minimum viable product. We had done prototypes. We had done pro bono pilots. We had started to take orders. All of that went completely for a toss, right? And then we had the unlock period starting August, September. One pocket of unlock up until Feb. Another pocket of unlock starting in June, right? And right now, my phone's hardly ever idle. Why? Because my startup is all about psychometrics. It's all about the mental health space. So everything that people are talking about, I didn't know this in 2019. Nobody could have known this in 2019. But in 2019, I was saying, what is the best and accurate way of measuring resilience? Measuring if somebody has a high anxiety level, measuring somebody is depressed, measuring positivity, hope, optimism. And now that's suddenly become very relevant. So yeah, things happen. Right. It's really been a fascinating hour. We've just gone at the top of the hour. It's been a highly engrossing conversation. And every time I do this, I get to learn from you guys. Right. Shaiju, Shivang, Shamil, it's been an absolute pleasure. And for the viewers, just a very quick heads up. From the standpoint of Startup Speaks, we're going to be taking a little bit of a festival break. So we're going to skip October. So enjoy the Durga Pujas, enjoy Dasera, enjoy Diwali, and I'll see you back on the other side of Diwali in November. Till then, thank you. Be safe. Goodbye.
Thank you very
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye now.